Jason in Tennessee.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, how are you doing, Jim?
Doing pretty good. Got Matt here too.
Yeah. I don't matter. Go ahead.
No, you guys both matter, and I gotta say, Jim, your hair looks on point today.
My hair is a complete disaster area.
Not allowed to comment on the host's looks.
Yeah, do it again, and I'll drop you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. What's up?
Sorry. Okay, yeah. So my question to you guys is, and I don't really have anything recited here. No book in front of me either. I wanted to discuss humanism for a minute to kind of get your take on that. I'm trying my best to learn
Humanism?
on
Humanism or secular humanism?
Moral secular humanism.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
If you could tell me what your take is, do you think secular humanism comports with the reality of human nature as it exists today, or would you say it's more of a utopia? And if it exists today, what kind of statistical analysis or studies do we have to provide that?
So that's a weird question to me, because it sounds like you're asking how many people's thoughts and actions are currently consistent with the values of humanism.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that's relevant.
So, I mean,
I don't know how that's relevant to anything, because humanism, like every other kind of top level moral, ethical system, is an ideal. Now, in the case of secular humanism, what it is we are recognizing that as far as we can tell, we are humans stuck on a planet, and we have to cooperate, because my actions impact you, your actions impact me. And irrespective of whether or not there is a God, there's not sufficient evidence to conclude that we can reach for help from beyond the natural realm. And so that our best course of action is to work together towards a better world. That's secular humanism in a nutshell. It doesn't even proclaim. It's like when you go through the manifesto, all three versions of it, there are some declarations about we're going to acknowledge basic human rights, etc. But it's not like there's a thou shalt, thou shalt, thou shalt type of list. So all humanism is doing is saying, in the absence of any reason to rely on the supernatural, we have to work together to make this world the best world we can be. And I think that there are a lot of people who are consistent with those values, including people who don't identify as secular humanists, who may identify as Christian, Muslim, etc. But it's not where we are yet. So I don't think that everybody even understands the values of secular humanism, but I think it's a reasonably achievable goal.
Yeah.
And okay. When you say, so you do think it is an attainable goal, though? That's the question.
Well, I did until recently. One of the things is that this glut of information has produced a whole bunch of people who will not accept real, reasonable, reliable, factual information, and instead are leaning towards conspiracy theorist garbage and things that alienate us. But my view, my reason for advocating for humanism isn't because I think the majority of the world ever will be secular humanists. It's because I think the majority of the world should be secular humanists.
Right.
Okay. I mean, you might as well say, like, if I'm advocating for sobriety, it doesn't matter how many people are capable of achieving sobriety. I'm saying sobriety would be preferred to, the opposite.
Sure. So if you don't mind, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure. I'll let Jim hit it because I talk too much.
No, you guys are fine. My follow-up question is this: in the world we live in, we obviously live in a world with several different societies that follow their own rules, laws, moral, guidelines, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. If you have a preference for or a moral code of your own, and you ascribe to humanism, if we're not currently under a one world government system, and so we can't all reach necessarily agreement on morals, if we entered into a conflict with another nation or society, how would you expect to realistically resolve issues?
Dialogue, talking to each other.
Okay.
I mean, what else would there be? I mean,
personally, I'm
asking a very general question. I gave you a very general answer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, what precisely you're asking.
I mean, I'm a fan of a one world government, but you don't need a one world government to have cooperation between governments. We have that now. We have the United Nations. We have sanctions. We have diplomacy. None of those things go away just because you're secular humanist.
Right.
Matter of fact, they get amplified because now instead of saying, my God and my religion is in charge of this particular state, which is a hindrance to diplomacy, now we don't have that problem.
Right. And we have extradition treaties with countries, and they have them with us that, some countries we won't have an extradition treaty with because they will do things to their prisoners we don't agree with, and we're not going to send someone to that country for that reason. Other countries do the same thing to us because we have the death penalty, so they won't extradite their citizens or people in their country because we have the death penalty still on the table, and they think that's really atrocious. So this kind of thing is happening now, and we're negotiating our way through it.
Yeah. The question is, when you look at certain societies, I would call based by statistics of how many people are so-called atheists or secular in China. I would say definitely China, which is one of the leading world global superpowers. I mean, they're not quite, they're past, they're getting close to us in economics. But my question to you is, that we're currently in tension or conflict with them. And correct me if I'm wrong, I wouldn't necessarily say that China, even if though they identify as secular, they wouldn't necessarily follow humanist practices as a majority. I'm not saying there's not exceptions.
No, you're right.
And so
you're absolutely right.
Jason, there is no secular humanist government or nation currently. There are some that are closer than others. China's not that close at all.
Right.
In much the same way, remember, so a lot of people would point to like Soviet Russia and say, this was an atheist regime. Well, okay, to some extent it was, in the sense that they outlawed religion, which is not anything that I would ever advocate, but they weren't a secular humanist regime. They were essentially a religion with the state as God, and China has something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't point out North Korea as an example because I understand that they.
Well, see, I would actually point to the Scandinavian countries first as being closer to that humanist ideal than either of the countries that you do, because both North Korea and China also have a government that doesn't believe in personal freedoms. And so they may be atheists, but remember, atheism is only an answer to a single question. It is not a worldview. It is nothing else. If you want to find out what an atheist's morals are, you can't say, well, I'm an atheist, and then begin to pick at something and begin to understand maybe what they believe. You actually have to go ask the individual atheist. So just because they're atheists doesn't mean that every atheist is necessarily going to agree with what they do. So when people keep bringing up these countries with really, really bad humanist, human rights policies, and they never bring up the countries that are more atheistic and have better human rights, like the Scandinavian countries, like Japan. And so it really becomes that question of, why are you picking these people that everybody agrees are really, really bad? That, North Korea is a pariah among other nations. China would be if they didn't have the economic power that they do, or the manufacturing that they do. But even they're changing quite a bit and becoming better at their human rights. But they still have a long, long, long way to go. So I would say picking on those two is fine, but why not go look at the Scandinavian countries that are doing things like talking about, are we closing our prisons too fast? Note, I said closing prisons too fast, not building them too slowly, like we talk about here in the United States. And the reason why they're talking about that is because they actually have policies in place that actually reduce crime. We don't. So why aren't we looking at those folks that are actually doing things to make sure that their populations are happy and healthy and actually accomplishing something, rather than look at a bunch of places that, they happen to be atheists, but okay, so what? Like I said, atheism is an answer to a single question. It is not a worldview.
And not all atheists are humanists.
Yeah, and not all atheists are humanists.
I have a question for Jason, though.
And I agree with that. I acknowledge that not all atheists subscribe to a humanism model. I saw the debate with Matt Dillahunty versus Peterson, where the argument was, is the USSR or the Soviet Union, would they be humanist? I agree by definition they're not. So I do understand the differences.
I have a question for you, though, Jason.
Point out, though. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you would point out what? I want you to finish.
Okay.
You said
I was just going to point out that I'm saying that. I was just going to point out that I do acknowledge that the Scandinavian countries would point more towards secularism. I mean, humanist, secular nations that you're talking about. All I'm saying, though, is that, yes, you're absolutely right to say you're atheist doesn't subscribe to a certain moral model. And so, therefore, you have these different nations that all have their own individual takes on moral values.
So the question I have, Jason, is if I were to, and I know we haven't done it thoroughly, but let's imagine for a moment that I basically outlined secular humanism, which is we're going to rely on evidence and reason and everything natural and science, and we're going to, declare that we value human life and equality and individual autonomy and all these things, and that in the process of solving conflicts, that we are going to resolve it through discussion and diplomacy and data and debate, and not through conquest or whatever else. That's what my model of secular humanism is. I recognize that not everybody would accept it. I don't know what its likelihood is of taking over the world, but I'm curious, Jason, what model could possibly be better, both in its goals, its likelihood to achieve results, and with regard to resolving conflicts?
So as a professed theist, of course, I will say that I am Christian. I do recognize that not everybody will agree with Christianity. What I don't have time to get into today, because my wife's about to get home, I will have to go, is about objective morality versus subjective. But that
you don't have an objective morality.
I do.
Yeah, you don't
have an objective morality.
You don't have
a morality you can measure.
There is literally no objection that could be launched against secular humanism as a moral foundation that is in any way solved by appealing to a God, even if that God were real.
Right.
So I would also point out that God has a really, really, really bad track record in motivating humans not to commit crimes or sin.
Right.
Horrifyingly bad.
And that's a whole
Christianity is particularly vile in that it allows for and sanctions slavery, misogyny, conquest, torture, all manner of immorality. It doesn't value individual freedom. It doesn't give good health information. It has this notion of unforgivable sin, of inherited sin, of retribution by substitutionary atonement. It is anti-LGBTQ. It is anti-science. There's nothing in there apart from, if you could get everybody to agree, then you would have agreeance for about a week, and then the First Baptist Church and the Second Baptist Church would go to war.
Yeah. And also, if you have kids, you probably know this, but if your kid starts writing on the walls, the best time to correct that behavior is immediately after the behavior, not to wait a year or until they're 18 or until they're dead to correct the behavior. And yet, all behavior correction from God comes after you're dead. That has absolutely very little impact on most people. Now, there are people, and they call the show a lot, who are absolutely terrified of hell and going to hell. So it does work on some people, but most of the people, it really doesn't have any severe impact. So, and you don't have an objective moral foundation in the most common sense of the word objective, which is measurable, unless you can prove to me how you measure it. I can actually go in and show you how we can actually measure various ways to measure human happiness and to whether or not policies and procedures of a government actually meet those. So those are all the problems that I have with everything Matt mentioned, and the ones that I brought up are all problems with Christianity as a moral standard.
I do want to say, actually, you actually pointed out children. Might as well announce it on air. This is my first time ever calling in. My wife just found out she was pregnant a few days ago. It's our first child.
Hey, congratulations.
Congratulations.
And I'm over the moon excited, so I just wanted to say that. I know it has nothing to do with the show.
I trust
Okay.
that you're a decent person who will be allowing your child to explore the world freely without indoctrination into a particular religion, so that they might perhaps embrace secular humanism without being poisoned against it prematurely. Sorry, I had to say that.
Absolutely.
I'm genuinely happy for you and your wife, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to get into it on another call sometime. I'd love to talk about the idea of objective versus subjective morality. I know today I can't really go down that rabbit hole. My last question regarding secularism not secularism. Humanism is this. And a humanist model is a prioritization for others. Are other people considered more important, self-sacrifice valued over your own self? I'm having trouble.
There's no answer to that.
Basically,
there's no answer to that. In some situations, so is there within secular humanism the opportunity for self-sacrifice or sacrificing yourself for others? Yes, that is included within it. It's not a requirement. Generally speaking, I care more about me than I do other people. And people are like, oh my gosh, that's so selfish. No. What it is that it's recognition of reality. And so I served in the military for 8+ years. There are people who I would probably take a bullet for. But my primary thing is we all do this. We care about me and then the family around me, and then gradually increases. But it is myopic to think that is selfish, because in reality, what you do and what happens with your life is likely to impact mine. The decisions you make, the votes you make, the laws that you're sanctioning, the way you spend your money, all potentially impacts my life. And if I just go through life going, I only care about me like this, well, that's a bad thing. But if you say, I care about me first, but I recognize that everybody else contributes to the things that are valuable in my life, and that I contribute to things that are valuable there, you can reach altruism through pure selfishness. I want the best life for me. And because my life is impacted by other people, it's in my best interest to do good things and be good to other people.
All right. Well, thank you for your service, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate the call.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
you can call us. You can call us back, but also if Sundays aren't good, I have a show on Wednesdays at 7 called The Hang Up on another network, and I'd be happy to talk about morality some night there if you want. But Wednesday night might be church for you.
Will do. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks.
No,
Bye.
yeah, I'm good. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. And so some folks in chat, just to address this, have noted that the Scandinavian countries are officially Christian countries. That is true. However, my understanding is that their population is mostly secular and don't really care so much about the religious side of things.
Yeah. If you were going to implement secular humanism as a foundation for government, I suspect that it would be likely to start in one of those countries.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and not America. Right. Despite the fact that we are the ones with a secular constitution. We are the world's first. We were the mold, and we have just put so much crappy poop in the mold that we can no longer be we can't currently be what we should be.